Let's talk about something that's all around us, powering a huge part of the business world, but it's practically invisible. It's called consignment inventory. It's this really fascinating way businesses can sell, use, and manage products they don't even own. Sounds kind of weird, right? Well, let's pull back the curtain and see exactly how it all works. Here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with what consignment actually is. Then I'll show you a super simple way to think about the 4 main situations you'll run into. We'll look at what happens when your stuff is at their place and when their stuff is at your place. We'll even get a peek at the accounting magic that keeps it all honest, and we'll wrap up with why this whole thing is such a game changer in business today. All right, so first things first. Before we get into the weeds, let's get a really solid grip on what we mean when we say consignment. I mean, think about it. These are perfect, everyday examples of consignment. That art gallery, there's no way they're buying all those paintings up front. That would be a huge, huge financial risk. And your office definitely doesn't own all the snacks in that vending machine. In both of these cases, one person is holding and selling stuff that's still owned by someone else. And you know what? That is the big idea right there. So here's the official definition. The key thing to burn into your brain is this split between possession and ownership. The gallery, that's the consignee. They have possession of the art. But the artist, the consignor, they still own it. It's their property until a customer walks in and buys a piece. Only then, at that moment of sale, does the ownership actually change hands. If you get that one principle, everything else we're about to talk about will make perfect sense. Now, this is where things can get a little messy if you're not careful. But luckily, the source material from Olaf Simron's blog gives us this brilliant, super simple way to map it all out. It all comes down to a simple little framework. Okay, check this out. We can understand pretty much any consignment situation just by asking 2 simple questions. That's it. First question, who owns the inventory? Is it you or is it them? And the second question, where is the inventory physically? Is it at your location or is it at their location? Based on the answers, you fall into one of these 4 boxes. It covers pretty much every case you're going to run into. Okay, let's dive into that top row of our little matrix here. These are the situations where you own the stuff, but it's physically sitting somewhere else.
And this really breaks down into 2 main flavors. On the left, you've got the classic consignment setup, right? You put your products on a customer's shelf. Think about a big soda company stocking the aisles of a grocery store. On the right, you've got more of a manufacturing scenario. This is where you send your own raw materials, let's say a giant roll of fabric, to a vendor who's going to do some work on it, like cutting and sewing. In both of these cases, it's still your property, even though it's not in your building.
So how do you possibly keep track of this? Well, it's actually pretty clever. In your system, you basically create a virtual location. Think of it as a digital twin that represents your customer's store. So when you ship them your products, you're not selling them, you're just doing a transfer from your real warehouse to their virtual one. The inventory is still yours, it's still on your books. The actual sale and the invoice, that only gets triggered when they call you up and say, hey, we just sold one of your widgets. Okay, let's flip the script. Time to look at the bottom row of our matrix. This is what happens when the inventory is sitting right there in your own building, but you don't actually own any of it.
And again, we've got 2 main scenarios. On the left, a customer sends you something they own. You know, like bringing your car to a mechanic for a repair. You have their property so you can perform a service on it. On the right, we've got a really powerful supply chain strategy called Vendor Managed Inventory, or VMI. This is where your supplier basically sets up a little mini store of their parts right inside your factory. You just walk over, grab what you need off the shelf for your production line, and that's the exact moment you buy it. You only pay for what you use right when you use it. It's pretty cool.
Now think about that car you're repairing for a customer. What's its value on your company's financial statements? The answer is a big, fat 0. Nada. Of course, you have to track it. You can't just lose their car. But because you don't own it, it has absolutely 0 impact on the financial value of your company. It is not your asset. Simple as that. And that brings us to the really slick part. Keeping the books straight, especially with that tricky vendor-owned inventory. I mean, how do you track thousands of parts that your vendor owns in your facility without it making your company's financials look all wrong? Well, it takes a little bit of accounting magic. And as Olaf Simron says in the source article, the whole point is to separate the value. You absolutely need to know what you have physically, but your balance sheet has to reflect the fact that you don't own it, at least not yet. So here's how that little bit of magic works.
Okay, so let's just walk through it. A truck pulls up from your vendor with, say, $10,000 worth of parts. The second your team receives those parts, your accounting system makes an entry. A special account, let's just call it consignment asset, goes up by 10 grand. This is super important. It creates an official record of the physical stuff you're now responsible for.
But here's the brilliant move. At the exact same microsecond, the system makes a second, perfectly opposite entry. Another special account, we'll call it consignment offset, gets hit with a negative $10,000 entry.
So what's the result of all that? Well, you've got a plus 10,000 and a minus 10,000, and they perfectly cancel each other out to zero. So you have a detailed physical record of all those parts for your operations team, but the net financial impact on your company's total value is absolutely nothing. It is a beautifully elegant solution to a really complex problem.
Okay, so after all of that, you might be thinking, why bother with all this complexity? It seems like a lot of work, right? Well, it's because the strategic payoff is absolutely massive.
For the company holding the goods, you don't have your cash tied up in inventory until the second you actually need it. That's a huge win for cash flow. For the supplier, they get a guaranteed spot for their products. This whole system makes powerful things like VMI possible. It cleans up the whole subcontracting and repair process, and it lets businesses try out new products in stores with way less risk. At the end of the day, it just creates a smarter, more flexible supply chain for everyone involved.
And that really brings us to the big final thought here. For hundreds of years, business was pretty simple. You buy something, you own it, you sell it. But consignment proves that possession and ownership don't have to be the same thing. So as our supply chains get smarter, more connected, more data-driven, you have to wonder, will the whole idea of owning inventory start to matter less than just having access to it, exactly when and where you need it? It's a pretty fascinating thing to think about. Thanks for tuning in to This Explainer.